You are tuned to ARP on the Accelerated Radio Network. It's 12 noon, and it's time to have lunch. Lunch with the Finance Bunch. Lunch with the Finance Bunch. Lunch with the Finance Bunch. Bringing money talk you can understand. And now here's your host, Miss Charlene.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Charlene, and welcome to Lunch with the Finance Bunch. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have in our studio today Dr. Ebony Utley. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
That's good. I'm so excited to have you here. My assistant and I were watching a lot of your videos yesterday, and I was just getting so excited about you being here. I like to think of you as a serial entrepreneur. I like that. And I want to know, we want to know everything about you, but we'll start off with, I know you're a professor. Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about, what you do and how you got your nickname. Those are the things I want to know.
Okay, let's make a very long story shorter.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a professor of communication at Long Beach State.
Okay.
And I like to say I teach the fun classes. So I used to teach a class on hip hop. I teach classes on pop culture and technology. I teach classes on family and relationships, intimacy and technology. So those are the things that I'm really interested in. I'm really excited to have an opportunity to actually be able to teach those things.
Right.
And I started my career as a social critic, if you will. So. Okay. I do a lot of analyses of pop culture. So how I teach my students to view pop culture, I was doing a lot of blogging and writing about pop culture. It's like, hey, what happens if we look at it this way? And that was really fun and exciting, but here's why it's also problematic. So I was doing a lot of the critic stuff, and I was trying to figure out how to brand myself as a social critic. Right?
Okay.
Like you put it on a business card, nobody knows what that means.
Right. You say
right?
Social critic. What is that?
What does she do? Pop culture critic didn't sound professional enough. So I was like, I need another moniker. And so I was like, well, what do? Like, I do ideas. And I'm like, well, I'm a woman who does ideas. And I was like, if I was a woman who did ideas, it's nowhere sexy enough, right? That means there are lots of us. But if I was the woman with ideas, then now I have a niche for myself. So I put it on all my social media, and I put it on my email signature, and I just started calling myself the woman with ideas. And then people started calling me the woman with ideas. And then people started calling me for my ideas. Like, hey, would you like to talk about this, write about this? And I was like, okay, it's not a traditional title, but it fits, and it's getting me the work that I want to do the things that I love to do.
Well, I love that because that's self-branding. Mm-hmm. You branded yourself, and you taught people how to approach you, basically.
Yes.
And so, we talked about this a little bit off the microphone, and we talked about how in today's society, if you're going to own your own business, you're going to have to incorporate technology. Mm-hmm. And you're also going to have to learn, what works and what doesn't. So you went through a little lineage of how you decided and how you came up with, okay, I'm going to brand myself as this. So remember we went through that little lineage and you said, okay, I picked these, 3 words and, how do you, So could you go through that for me?
Yeah. So I went through the traditional process. If you're reading the business magazines and you want to figure out how to brand yourself, you're supposed to go to the people closest to you and ask them for adjectives that they would use to describe you.
Right.
So I did, and I made a list, right? And I had all these adjectives, and sometimes it was instructive in other ways. I was like, wait, my parents see me as stubborn. Huh.
Okay.
I asked them in separate conversations. I was like, but wait, like that's also like tenacity, right? That's also what their grit is what they're calling it now. And I was like, okay. I was like, these are the kinds of things that I think can accurately describe me, perhaps not using the adjectives that they chose, but different kinds of words, but none of them translated into a title the way the exercises said that they would. So, I would recommend that people do it. Like, honestly, go to the people closest to you, and then also go to some people who aren't as close, like perhaps a colleague or a supervisor who doesn't know you as well, but get a sense of their impressions of you and how they would narrow them to one word. And if you don't like them, then maybe it's time to do some changes, right? And how you're professionally representing yourself.
Yes.
And again, like me, if you don't like the particular word, someone might see you in a way that could be interpreted as negative, but if you shift it to another a synonym, you're like, wait, that's actually kind of positive, and that is who I want to be.
Right.
So that sort of exercise didn't lead me to the title like I wanted, but it did lead me to focus on this thing that I do, which is the ideas thing, and that's how I ultimately got to the woman with ideas.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Now, you do a lot of different things.
Yes.
And you have managed to fit them under one umbrella. And so for our audience, because I have a lot of young people who have a lot of business ideas, and they need to kind of harness them and maybe put them under one umbrella so that it doesn't appear that they're all over the place. So what steps do you take to, when you have more than one idea, how do you take it from multiple ideas that are scattered to putting them under one umbrella?
That's a really big question. I think it actually has two parts.
Okay.
Right? So when you have a lot of ideas and you're trying to figure out which one you want to pursue, I'm always pursuing the one that I think could make the most money fastest, right? Because you figure that out, right?
Right.
Is this a good business idea?
Right.
And if the goal is to make money quickly and you don't, then perhaps it's not a business idea anymore. Perhaps it's a hobby.
Right.
And that is really good to know before you sink lots of resources into something that's a hobby.
That's right.
I mean, if you have a product that you love, but no one else is interested in purchasing it, then it's not your product anymore.
Right. That's right.
And I think it's important to know that as soon as possible. So if your goal is to pursue the thing that makes money and it doesn't make money, then you know that, okay, this is something that I love, but I need to pursue something else if I'm trying to get to the profit incentive.
Exactly.
But then you might also realize, like, this doesn't make money and I don't care because I'm passionate about it and it's important to me. And maybe now you have a nonprofit organization, right? Or maybe now you have a volunteer activity that you really want to pursue. So that's how I would direct people into choosing the ideas in order of priority that they want to pursue them.
Exactly.
But once you have a lot of ideas, kind of like I do, and they're all moving in different directions, then it's important to tell your story. Right? So just like I decided I wanted to be the woman with ideas, I also had to decide how I was going to tell my story. So first, my story was about popular culture because I was really interested in popular culture and I was teaching it and I was writing about it. So whether it was hip hop or feminism in popular culture, it was still, or soap operas,
Right.
I could get everything that I loved under the popular culture category.
Right.
But then when my ideas started to expand, I was like, okay, I need a new category. So then the category became intimacy. I'm really interested in intimacy and relationships and how people interact with each other. And so sometimes that's still hip hop and that's still love in hip hop, which
That's right.
we could maybe talk about later, but I still
Definitely.
I really love love in hip hop, and infidelity also became an intimacy sort of thing.
Right.
Even when I was writing the book, it became a book about rappers' intimacy with God, right? And sometimes it's a parental relationship and sometimes it's a sibling relationship, but it's still about intimacy.
Right.
And so that's the story I would tell people when they ask for the bio, that intimacy was front and center. That's how I'd brand myself on the social media. And now that's shifting more towards technology. So I'm moving more into the tech realm, but I'm taking intimacy with me. So now the bridge is intimacy and technology.
Right.
So it's not just infidelity, but it's what I call them digital indiscretions, right? Infidelity and technology, or hip hop and technology. So it's all about how you tell the story. It's not like you'll be wrong at the end of the
Right.
day, but if you want people to understand your body of work, you've got to come up with an overarching theme that it's your responsibility to promote yourself with that theme. And then if you're going in different directions at some point, again, it's your responsibility to say, well, now I'm moving in a completely different direction. I did this, it represented me at a certain point in my life, but now I'm doing something else.
So what I notice is that you guide your audience in the direction that you want them to go. And, and for those who don't think they have an audience, yes, they do, because you always have an audience, especially as a business person. You have an audience. Your customer is your audience, you know?
And your audience and customers are not everybody.
No.
As soon as you're like, I'm for everybody, it's like, you're for nobody.
That's right. Exactly. Because that's when you confuse people.
Yes.
It's like, do you have a focus?
Yes.
And then how did you decide to, traditionally professors teach, right? And they might have, an outside interest that brings in income. But what made you decide to expand in such a dynamic way?
It's called a furlough.
Okay, could you explain that?
So I think it was 2009, Cal State, Long Beach, and all the CSUs actually put faculty on a furlough. And I didn't know what that meant. And I looked it up and I was like, military leave. I feel like that's not what's happening here.
Right.
Essentially, a furlough means that they can pay you less money and demand as much, if not more work at the end of the day.
Wow.
And when I realized that they could do that, they could take 10% of my salary that I was never going to get back, never going to make up in retirement, and that's just the way it was, and there wasn't anything I can do about it. That it was time for me to start developing an outside income, right? Because the university was not going to be that good government job that I thought it was going to be, and that the generation before me encouraged me to get. So the upside of the furlough was that we had to cancel X number of classes a semester because they weren't going to pay us for that.
Right.
And so I had this time then in the middle of the semester where I could do stuff. And I was like, I think I'm going to travel to other campuses and start giving lectures, because if they wanted me on a Wednesday, I'd be like, sure, that's the day that I'll cancel class, right? It's not going to be a problem. The students are used to furloughs, and I'll just fly out, right, and do the lecture for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I really started doing, I mean, I had done some of it before. I think I started in around 2006, but with the furlough, I started going hardcore into the Utley experience and doing the lecture circuit and promoting myself that way, because I had the time, and quite frankly, I also needed the money.
Right, right. So, and we talked a little bit about this too. You know, in today's economy, it's not the economy that we thought it would be. And so when you're looking at professions, you know, even if it's your passion, like you were saying earlier, it may not pay the money that it used to or continue to pay the money that you were accustomed to. And you have to think about other ways of branching out. I know that I've talked to a lot of students, and they are a little disappointed when they get into the workforce and the amount of income they can make based on their degree just isn't there. And so you and I talked about this too. This encourages them to be an entrepreneur. And so as an entrepreneur, you know, of course it's a scary thing, you know, can be very scary. But I'd like to know, for the young people out there who listen to this show, what would you tell them about balancing time?
It's a constant struggle. Being an entrepreneur is hard.
It is.
If people ask me, like, what's your defining factor of being an entrepreneur? I'm like, it means I cry a lot.
Right.
And I feel like that's important to actually share with people, because I was talking to a friend and be like, this is so hard. I feel like I'm crying too much as an entrepreneur. And he was like, entrepreneurs cry all the time. I'm like, yeah, but no one talks about it.
Right.
He's like, well, because that destroys the image of an entrepreneur, right? But it is hard and it is frustrating. And sometimes you're just like, I don't have the skills that I need today to do this thing that was supposed to be done yesterday. Right?
Yes.
But what that means is, I say to people, it's like, hey, I have a PhD in Google. You give me an hour, I'll figure it out. Or at least I'll figure out who to call to help me. And that's part of the problem solving process. It's not just this thing that you're building and solving problems with, but in the interim, all these little things that come up that you have no idea how to do. So when it comes to balancing time, it's important to, in an ideal world, to block out X amount of time every day for your entrepreneurial endeavors.
Right.
And in an ideal world, that would be your best time of the day. So for me, it's in the mornings. First thing when I get up, I got the best energy. If I can give that to my entrepreneurial project, it's a good look. Right. But even if I can't make that morning slot because other things are happening, you just try to give it a little bit of time each day. So your project and your product are always moving forward. Once you lose that momentum, it's so hard to get it back. If you, as an entrepreneur, miss deadlines for people who are contracting for you or you're networking with or providing opportunities, they're not going to come back.
That's right.
You've shown yourself as irresponsible at this point. So you always need to be moving so that you can meet your deadlines.
Exactly.
And keep a calendar.
Please keep a calendar.
Please keep a calendar. I was looking today, I was like, oh snap, I have a meeting on the 22nd and it says I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and I haven't done half those things yet. Right? But it's not just on me, because I had to get those tasks to my contractor so the contractor could get them back to me so that I could have this meeting, and I haven't done that, and now everyone's behind. Right? So it's very important to just do a little bit every day, even if you can't give it the big chunk that you want, and to keep your calendar so that you don't fall behind. And on that calendar, not just have the meetings that you need to make, but the things you're supposed to deliver for those meetings. So you can keep yourself like on task. So yeah, I mean, you could be making marketing materials today, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing. Today, you're supposed to be like putting a schedule or reading contracts or doing something else, but you have to keep yourself accountable. Like, I'm huge on the accountability. So if you also have another entrepreneur partner, not necessarily working with you, but someone who's also going through the journey, he or she can help hold you accountable. Like, hey, did you do that thing that you were supposed to do? Like, hey, I have my EPK. Can we swap it with your EPK so that we can talk about these things? Accountability is key, because even though you're an entrepreneur, you're not doing it by yourself.
Exactly. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And being an entrepreneur can be exciting, but the good thing about being an entrepreneur is you don't have a boss, but the bad thing is that you don't have a boss. So you can slip into mediocrity, and that's not where success is when you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, speaking of strategies, I also like the to-do list. Are you familiar with this?
Tell us about the to-do list.
So a to-do list is all the things you have to do. It's
Right.
never ending, right? I've got like 1,000 of those. It's also not encouraging or uplifting,
Right.
right? But at the end of the day, I have these huge whiteboards in all my offices. I make a to-do list of all the things I did today. Like, these are the things that I actually did. So maybe I didn't finish this project, but I did a third of the things that need to be done to finish it, right? And I can put that on the to-do list.
Right,
And
so
so
it
at the end
feels
of the day,
good.
I have this huge list of things I did, and be like, okay, I was productive. Now I can watch TV or go for a walk or do this fun thing that I wanted to do that otherwise I might have punished myself for, because there are still things on the to-do list. But on the to-do list, I can celebrate the things I did and then go reward myself for that.
I need a to-do list.
Yes.